Hi, my name's Phil. I like to talk about politics, and in this video, as we prepare to find out what Trump's tariff plans are for the world generally, but the UK specifically, I'm going to discuss the pros and cons of the government taking various action against it. Would, for example, the public support retaliatory tariffs, something that many politicians and even diplomats seem to be calling for? But first, for daily news and commentary, please hit the subscribe button to stay notified. So we have already been hit with tariffs technically by Trump's government, steel and aluminium, but although this is not great for those industries, it's not really a big enough deal for our overall economy to risk an escalation, so we didn't do anything about it. But this coming week, we're going to see the full extent of Trump's plans. He seems to have numerous strategic aims with his trade war, some of which are contradictory with others. But one use of tariffs, he says, is to balance out import taxes on US products. So the UK applies VAT, a sales tax, to imports, including from the United States. So according to Trump's logic, we will be in line for hefty tariffs on our exports to the US. However, it won't be consistent. So VAT is 20%. So we apply 20% to imports, you would say, from the US. Trump is talking about 25% tariffs, because he's obviously fixated on that Sesame Street that one time that did the number 25. Seems to be his magic number. The government are furiously negotiating a special arrangement. There's talk of possibly cutting a deal on the digital services tax, which, as I've explained before, doesn't really raise much anyway. But we're also trying to dangle the carrot of the UK-US trade deal, which could be lucrative to Trump's tech bros. The hope is that Trump will consider these valuable enough to give us special dispensation, in which case the budget forecast may well hold up. If not, Reeves is going to find her headroom has once again been caved in. But it's worth considering what the government should do if Trump can't be persuaded to go easy on us. Several senior politicians, as well as some diplomats, have argued that we should respond with retaliatory tariffs. The diplomats, at least, who know their business, argue that if we continue to do nothing, even if budget-wrecking tariffs are applied by Trump, he will see us as a soft touch and come back for more. And this will have to be factored in. We know that Trump doesn't honour any agreement he makes. Canada certainly knows it. The new trading security agreement, which Carney has insisted needs to be negotiated from scratch, will replace the current deal, which Trump has trashed. But Trump cannot even claim that it was a bad deal agreed by a weak president who should never have signed up to it. It was Trump himself during his first term who negotiated it. And British diplomats are also pointing to the way in which Carney has stood up to Trump and seems to have forced concessions with his tough action on retaliatory tariffs, although I would caution a couple of things here. First, Canada's trade much more important to the US than the UK. First, there's more of it by value, a lot more, but also if the frictionless supply chains which span the USA and Canada are disrupted, that's really bad for American manufacturing, which Trump claims to want to defend. There's no such supply chains between the US and the UK, just normal transatlantic trade. Second, it's the appointment of Carney which has unlocked a more conciliatory tone from Trump. Trudeau took the same strong action, but Trump's reaction was not the same, suggesting personality played a part there. Of course, it could just be that Trump was envious of Trudeau's staying power. However, I think there is merit in the argument that if Trump hits us hard and we do nothing, he will come back for more later. After all, one part of his trade war plans is revenue raising. He's not applying these tariffs for punishment as such, but because he thinks he can use the extra revenue to reduce or even eliminate income tax. This, of course, will not occur. It's an idea from the 19th century, which is hopelessly unrealistic in the 21st century America. So he fails to generate the sort of revenue he thinks he should be able to generate from it, obviously. He will then seek to address the failures by, instead of rethinking his basic premise, going, no, what we need is higher rates. 25%, that's far too low. So he'll just keep raising the rates further and further. And obviously, where are you going to start applying those rates? Are you going to apply it to a country or a trading bloc that's going to punch you back in the nose? Or are you going to go for the country that didn't actually react to you last time, who didn't inflict pain on you the first time you did it? But would the British public support it? Like I've said before, we don't really have enough trade with the USA to hurt them like Canada, Mexico, China or the EU. So we would only be doing it as a show of force, right? Plus, the retaliatory tariffs just raised the cost of goods in the UK, potentially stoking inflation. Now, the usual wisdom here is what you do is you target politically sensitive US exports in order to minimize the inflationary effects, which could send us back into stagflation, from which we're only just starting to come out of it. There are products we could target. We would target products, for example, that are aimed at the high end, so it's only rich people who would suffer. It wouldn't necessarily then stoke inflation. Certainly not for ordinary people, and ones that are very important to key figures within Trump's administration. Obvious one would be Tesla's, right? But the government seemed to have ruled out targeting retaliatory tariffs in that way, in the way that, you know, has worked in the past for, say, Canada and the EU. I saw a comment from the government this weekend that no individual company, because they'd raised the issue of Tesla's, no individual companies would be targeted, they say. So if we do apply retaliatory tariffs, we're not going to target, for example, Tesla, which seems foolish to me. But also worth considering is that some YouGov polling published by Best for Britain seems to show that the British public wouldn't support retaliatory tariffs anyway. Now, I'd have preferred some more comprehensive polling on this. There was really just one question asked, and it asked people to choose just one from a range of options to deal with the tariffs. However, only 10% chose retaliatory tariffs in order to convince Trump to back down. The figure fell to 8% when it came to Labour voters, a lower score than even for Reform UK voters. 43% want us to deal with American tariffs by just improving relations with our other trade partners, including the EU, in order to offset the damage. Now, that is a figure which rises to a very large majority of 60% for Labour voters. So although I'd have liked to have also seen what people think of each measure in isolation as well, the polling nonetheless highlights that there would be severe political risk in retaliatory tariffs, even though I acknowledge there is economic risk either way. Compare the situation with Canada, where although the retaliatory tariffs will sting Canadians, they are up for the fight. So at least for now, voters are backing the government and taking a tough line. The evidence in the UK is that this would not be the case. Actually, as a little aside, it's worth just looking at another one of the options. So improving relations with Trump with the aim of persuading him to remove tariffs. Now, only 6% of Labour voters think this is the way to go, as opposed to 22% of Conservatives and a whopping 42% of Reform voters. I know I'm biased, but the vast majority of Labour voters have got this one right. Our main tactic has been improving relations with Trump. Starmer's been on a massive charm offensive. He's pushed the idea of a tech-based trade deal, which would be valuable to Trump's tech bros. He's offered an unprecedented second slap-up meal with the monarch. I do not know what more we could do, frankly. This has literally been our plan A. If Trump hits us hard with tariffs, regardless of all that, it will have failed, and we must certainly switch to a plan B. It's really just a question of what that plan B is. Personally, I would be thinking along these lines. So first, although being hit heavily with tariffs is being described in the media as disastrous for the UK economy, that is only because our economy is already fragile. The actual cost in dollars is not as great as for similar economies because the vast majority of our exports to the US are services, not goods, and they're not hit. So we genuinely could compensate for Trump's trade war with a much closer relationship with the EU. Agreeing a customs union would almost completely counter fully Trump tariffs. It would be breaking a manifesto promise, but the government could genuinely claim new information here. It's certainly an option. The problem is that the tariffs will land this coming week, but whatever we agree with the EU, talks don't even begin until next year as part of the scheduled TCA negotiations. So we still need a sticking plaster for this year and maybe next year. So maybe Labour should lay the groundwork for a much closer than planned trade relationship with the EU, you know, to encourage a bit of optimism. And in the meantime, take a look at removing pension relief for high earners or something, because that would also raise enough to reinstate Reeves' headroom if Trump takes it out again. It won't help the exporters who will suffer, that is true. And I've said before, Plan A should always be to protect the exports. It's all right just looking at the tax revenues. People's jobs matter here. But if Trump is determined, if there is no way we can persuade him to drop the tariffs, then there's not a lot we can do for those exporters other than offer them better access to other markets to compensate. And the richest plum is the EU. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, please click the like button and subscribe for further content. If you'd like to support the channel further, you can click the join button for memberships. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.